Hello, this is Mr. Baker, and welcome to this introduction on documentary films. Documentary films are non-fictional, slice-of-life, factual works of art, and they're sometimes known as cinema verite. For many years, as films became more narrative-based, documentaries branched out, and they've taken a great diversity of forms since their early beginning. The first official documentary or nonfiction narrative film was Robert Flaherty's Nanook of the North of 1922. It was a look at the harsh life of the Canadian Eskimos living in the Arctic, although some of the film scenes of obsolete customs were staged. Documentaries actually comprise a pretty wide variety of films. One type is the live performance. Perhaps one of the most renowned is the film Woodstock, 3 Days of Peace and Music. A very different sort of documentary is the expose. Perhaps Michael Moore is the most famous practitioner of this type of film, where he has an agenda and he tries to expose a social issue by actually getting out in front of the camera and aggressively interviewing people and making a statement through his films. The first famous example of this was Roger and Me, which exposed the impact on Flint, Michigan, made by some of General Motors' policies. And more recently, the documentary Sicko was a harsh look at the American healthcare system. Michael Moore drives conservatives crazy with his lack of objectivity towards his subjects. A film that would be a better example of one that appears at least to be more objective would be Berkeley in the 60s, where the filmmakers study the free speech movement at Berkeley that evolved into the anti-war movement, and they take every measure to get interviews from different perspectives on the subject, and their agenda is much less evident with the film. This gives some people the idea that documentaries can in fact be objective. Take, for example, the films of Ken Burns. I imagine that many people would say that he has objectively studied the broad subjects of the Civil War, baseball, jazz, but in looking at the archival information that he's collected, all of those photographs, he's carefully selected. And in emphasizing some subjects, he's choosing not to emphasize other subjects. This was particularly noticeable to me when he did his huge documentary on jazz. I'm more familiar with that particular subject, so I noticed his omissions. And some documentarians have faulted him. I quote one who I've referenced at the end of the slideshow. Because he uses documentary as a kind of national therapy, producing a kind of mourning moment, a nostalgia for the past, in which no one can find no useful questions or analyses that we could apply to today's realities. And there's no active audience produced, just a sort of dreamy, passive audience that gains a sweet, sad knowingness about the Civil War. So when we look at our documentary, Little Dieter Needs to Fly, bear in mind that even though we're going to hear directly from the subject whom the documentary concerns, this is not an entirely objective rendering of what happened to him. In fact, we'll notice that the director, Werner Herzog, uses reenactments and isn't entirely concerned about just giving us the facts of the situation. In fact, he has artistic notions about the experience. On the other hand, when we look at the feature film, Rescue Dawn, starring Christian Bale, this is rooted in fact what happened to Dieter, and then of course we expect, since it's fiction, it does take artistic license. But it's kind of interesting. These aren't two completely different things. There's an overlap between the two types of film, the documentary, which is not totally objective, and the feature film, which is not entirely fictional. A side note for a moment, one of my favorite types of documentary films is the type that actually looks at the filmmaker's work. There are three that I would recommend. One that I've used in this class before is called Lost in La Mancha, which records or documents the attempt by Terry Gilliam to make a film starring Johnny Depp about Don Quixote. And the film never got made, and you see why in the documentary. In fact, after watching the documentary, you're surprised that any film would ever be completed. Another similar type of inside look is the one about Francis Ford Coppola that's made by his wife called Hearts of Darkness, A Filmmaker's Apocalypse. And since she had such an inside look at the film and her husband's near nervous breakdown while he was making it, we get all kinds of interesting insights into the creative process and the challenge of making films. And then one of the most renowned documentaries about filmmaking actually concerns Werner Herzog as a subject. While he was making the film Fitzcarraldo, a crew came in and documented his challenges in the jungle of the Amazon, and I would recommend The Burden of Dreams to you. This film took on the extraordinary challenge of Herzog actually having natives of the Amazon jungle drag a steamship over a small hill, and he was determined not to use the special effects, but actually, recreate this for his story. It's just absolutely fascinating. I'm looking forward to studying the documentary film Little Dieter Needs to Fly with you, and it will be enjoyable comparing it to Rescue Dawn. But I hope that after seeing it, you'll be interested in looking at other great documentaries. It's a type of film that's often overlooked.